All right. So the way we're going to do this today, there's actually three of us going to present, and I'll go into that a little bit more. I'm the managing director for the Materials Research Institute at Penn State, one of five big institutes. We focus on materials processing, but we run a fabrication facility, 10,000 square feet, and probably close to $40 million in characterization equipment, from really expensive TEMs to powder testing. We got quite the suite of instrumentation. In that area, we have about 40 staff members, all technical staff from PhDs to engineers that train users, the typical core facility activity. David Spaar is our Leo lead programmer. He's a programmer that works for MRI and the Institute, is on our team. And Jeff Berda is a programmer analyst, database specialist, who's also got involved in reporting. So I'm going to kind of give an overview of what's happened, why we're down this path, how it works. Dave's going to take you through the branch changes that we've made in taking NEMO and pushing it forward into the Penn State environment, Leo. And before I go much further on that, I just want to thank NIST for putting NEMO out there, giving everyone the opportunity for a great starting point. We found a need to kind of spur off from it significantly based on some of the things you'll hear about later. And then Jeff is going to talk about how we did the billing activity along with reporting, which is kind of a, it's not in NEMO, but we needed to integrate it and make billing work within the Penn State system, which is in mass change and chaos. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So you can see on the slide, we have Leo in the repository. It's up there. That's our version. You'll hear more about it now. So if you want to go to the next slide, Dave.
I'm not currently sharing, but I can go ahead and start then.
Oh, I thought you were. Okay. Thought you were going to share, and then we were just going to work off of you.
Yes, I was just kind of waiting for the correct starting point, which I guess it's now. Okay. Are you seeing the title screen?
Yep.
Okay.
So Leo Laboratory Equipment Operations, we follow a lion theme because it's the Penn State Nittany Lions. Our financial system is called Simba, another lion theme. But if you can go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about why the team, Leo implementation, Leo reports, and then asks, let you ask questions and try and answer them. Next one. Excuse me. So how do we get here? Penn State is a fairly large organization, as are some of you out there. We've run core facilities for a number of years. Our nanofab stood up working with an external vendor, its own system called RIMS, Research Instrumentation Management System, with a private software consulting firm. It went end of life on us about 5 years ago. We said, we got to come up with something different. We went through a complete RFP, looked at probably 10 or 12 different versions of software out there, narrowed it down to a couple. And then we had management chaos and upheaval. A VP of research came in, kind of threw a wrench in the path we were on, wanted to start the process over. That process led to someone else at the university who had never run a core facility in her life or been involved in it, being in charge of the search. And then 3 weeks later, the VP left Penn State. So we wound up through all of that process with a vendored solution at the university called iLab. Some of you may know of it. Some of you may use it. It is a good system, but for us, it was about 10 steps back from the system we had currently had. And we couldn't go that far backwards. There was just too many open questions. Their lead time on their development was too long. They couldn't control who used. There were a lot of things we didn't like. Right about then, NEMO came out, kind of went more public. We kind of knew about it. We started looking at it and we said, all right, we should go down this path. And we broke off from the rest of the university that was in the process of using iLabs because most of them had no system and it was better than nothing. They were using Excel spreadsheets and logs and trying to build off of that. So we turned to NEMO. Dave was on board then. We started talking. We had a core group of like 8 people, several technical people. I think the next slide shows this. Dave, myself, Leanna Horner, who is listening in on this, is an administrative coordinator, and went down the path of, excuse me, understanding NEMO and adopting it to Penn State's needs. It was different enough that we felt we needed to branch. We couldn't stay the path. And we have 4 different labs currently running in this system. They account for probably 50% of Penn State's core facility use, probably maybe more. And that's about $5 million a year with nearly 1,500 internal and external users. Right now, the university, other cores are using iLabs, but iLabs comes at a fee, as does Leo, right? We have a team of people that are maintaining, operating, run it. So there's money invested in that too. So neither one of these are free options. But there's a licensed annual license fee that you have to pay for iLab, and you're stuck with their service and their timeline on development. So we implemented a year ago in July 1, 2020. At the same time, Penn State overhauled its financial system and went from an old DOS-based TN3270 screen emulator financial system that was self-built in the natural programming language and had run for about 25 years to an SAP instance, which they called Simba. And that was a monumental shift for us. We had in the past run and pushed our billing and finances up into the financial system. We had to do that again. So we went through that process. That turned out, not to be as hard as some of the other things in the financial system, like understanding how to pay our vendors and what our balances were on accounts, and the fact that Simba didn't recognize sub accounts from our old system, and they took, we had external users, about 200 different companies or other universities, and they all got dumped into one account. And we're still in the process of extracting that information and pulling it out. But we went active July 1, and I can say it was a really smooth transition. We had a couple of little bumps, no major shutdowns the first week, but we have been up and operating and running consistently since then. So if I can have the next slide. There's the team. You can see me, Dave to the right of me, Jeff Berda, and Leanne Horner. I said we had 4 technical contacts. So we were fortunate in that within the cores, there were a couple tech savvy people, including one of the original implementers of our previous system, RIMS, Guy Lavalli, who helped build that system and is still a nanofab engineer doing a lot of external work, but he was instrumental in this process along with all the team. We used a couple other external technical folks from other cores in other institutes, and a financial assistant. Can I have the next slide? So what's our process? We're a big place. We have user and account setup. Accounts are not created unless they are tied to a legitimate operating expense budget. If the budget doesn't exist, we don't create accounts because that creates chaos later and where charges get applied. So we've gotten the users in the mindset of they can only work when they have an account that works. And then users, all the accounts fall under a PI or a responsible party. And users have to request permission from that PI to get an account set up in the system. They get permission, and then their account is active and tied to a budget. We do a lot of external work for both fabrication and characterization. And to do that, we actually have to do the billing on it. The university says someday they may be able to take that over, but we need accounts created quickly. We need to push invoices out. So we have that whole subsystem or that business process set up to do billing. And you'll hear more about how we built the billing system and what we can do with that later. We have reservation and use logins, just like Leo. We have a lot of staff versus user-driven work. So staff can log in on behalf of a user and do the work for them. It just adds the staff charge on top of the equipment charge. We also implemented a validation of all transactions by person performing the work. So if you log a transaction, what comes back is you have to actually go in and validate is, yes, I did that, and that's what I wanted to do, because we found a lot of times people don't log out, there's errors, there's something that goes wrong. We wanted to track what was going wrong and why. When a user has a validation error and they want to make a change, it goes to the staff member to approve. When a staff member has a validation change, it goes to the core administrator to approve, which is the responsible. In our case, it's the director of the course. And when the directors have a change, it goes to, I think it goes to Leanna, one of the main admins for all of the course. We do nightly confirmation of active accounts out of our financial system. So every night we pull down all the active accounts, and if an account that was in our system ended or hits the end date, it's turned off. So the user can't bill against an account that doesn't work. We do a monthly direct bill push, which means we take all the data, we roll it up and push it out into the project, from the projects in Simba or in Leo to the accounts in Simba. That's the workflow. That's done monthly. The staff are all reminded they've got to make sure all their transactions and users are validated, cleaned up, end of month close, so we can push valid data into Simba. It's important that it's valid, because if we're pushing errors, it just takes a lot more work to fix it. So we try and make sure we are not pushing errors to accounts that don't work or the wrong data, and that's part of that validation process. We try to minimize deferred transactions. So sometimes we don't know what's going on with a bill. Something's wrong, it didn't get validated. We will pull that off and push it the next month, but that's a manual process that we do the best we can to minimize. We should only have less than a handful of those a month. We are personally, or within our unit, doing bills on all the external projects. So that is a PDF system that gets emailed right out of the billing system from the data in Leo, which also means we have to do the ongoing collection, right? People pay, they partially pay, they can pay with credit cards. How do we handle all that? And there's a finance person that does that. We are continually bombarded with feature updates from users, faculties, staff. I would say mostly it's staff driven, because they're the ones dealing directly with the users and know what's happening and what we can do. We also closely follow the NEMO updates and kind of put those on our list of feature set updates and work through those continually. Have a plan, have a list, and prioritize those regularly. We're a fairly small group. I think the business functions are handled by about 1.5 administrators and the 1 programmer FTE. And when I say that, it's about a little more than half of David and a little less than half of Jeff are, most of their job is working on Leo and these business functions around how the cores operate. And to do that, we actually charge the cores. The cores are, their time is allocated against the core budgets as an administrative cost. So it's built into the fee structure, which helps to support the infrastructure we need to make those cores run better. Next slide. And that's the end for me. If there's any questions about all of that, we'll deal with them more towards the end. We tried to leave about 15 minutes at the end for questions. And if we don't, if we don't get to any of those, you can certainly reach out to me. My contact information will be on the last slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I'll take over here. So basically, oops, Leo is NEMO. Obviously, we diverged quite a while ago. I think it was version 1.13 where we split off, and keeping along with the features has been something that's been not what I would call the coding best practices, more about looking at the features and manually implementing them than adopting wholesale integration of the code. But we needed changes that fit with our business process. And one of the first things that we needed was the ability to have multiple groups of labs, cores, that would be able to track all their usage and billing and management of tools through a kind of single process for their particular group. And so the cores affected users in the sense of staff. Actual just users of the facilities are not associated with a core, since that's related to a billing function. Tools, areas, consumables, those are all each associated with a single core. We had a request to add the ability to do multi-customer transactions, and that was something that allows you to choose more than one user for a particular run of a tool, and after the fact assign how much time was spent on each user's action. We added the ability to just ad hoc add transactions for the cases where maybe the network is unavailable and Leo can't be accessed when someone's actually using a tool. We wanted a mechanism to capture that transaction after the fact. We did some integration with configurations and consumables to try to automate the creation of the post-usage questions. At the time, they were being created manually, I believe it was, and some of the staff asked if we could find a way around that. We got several requests to expand the ability to choose the targets of email, so we did some modifications there. Bob mentioned that we added a contesting feature for the transactions, and we included that with the validation page. We implemented several timed events and did some mechanisms that we're still trying to decide which we like the best way of doing it, but there were several approaches that we were able to take. And there are some other changes that are related to the updates that Bob mentioned are requested by staff. So with respect to cores, a user that's a staff member could potentially be associated with multiple cores. And in the case that they are, what that does is it allows them, when they're making a staff charge, to choose which core will be assigned the money that's collected from that charge. With respect to like tools and areas and consumables, they are simply associated with a single core, and then that association indicates how money is collected on their usage is directed. The multiple customer transactions, this is what a tool run might look like when it starts. You can see there's an option to either go in more or less as a user, or you can use it for other customers. And each customer has to have a legitimate project to which the run can be charged. Once the run is started, comments can be added that will be associated with any invoice sent to the customer, and the individual comment fields will be seen only on that particular customer's invoice, but a general comment, which can be added down here, would be shared with all the customers. And when it's time to stop the use of the tool, the user has the option to assign the time that was spent either through percentages or by explicitly putting in hours and minutes used. And that then gets tracked as a set of transactions in the database, which can then be billed. The ad hoc transactions, they give the ability to simply enter the time and date during which a tool was used. There's some validation checking on the back end to ensure that there's no overlap between the ad hoc event being created and an existing event, because the purpose of the system is to track events that for whatever reason couldn't be captured by the system. So we try to put on some limitations to exactly how it can be used. It also supports the use of or the tracking of an area access record if that's needed. We don't use our areas in the same type of fashion that they're used at NIST. We only have a few areas where we track the comings and goings of users, and that actual access is controlled through a separate system that we do not have direct access to. If we find that the system gets updated and it has an accessible API, we might be able to look at doing some more integration with the areas at that point. For configurations and consumables, what we did was to update the database model to relate consumables and configurations. And this gave us the ability to add a multiple select list to the detailed administration view for a configuration. And then once the items are selected, they're available when the tool is run as a dropdown that you can select the different items for. And when the tool is running, it'll create the post-usage questions that have to have a answer applied before the stop button is made available for the user to stop the run. And as I mentioned before, this was something that the staff had requested to make it easier for the generation and capture of the post-usage data. For email, we had requests to be able to select users more broadly. So we added some searches that would give different types of capabilities, and we're thinking about expanding this to a more generic kind of advanced search interface. But from the screen, you can see that there's different types of groupings of users that can be chosen as the starting point for creating an email. Once the group or user or tool is chosen, the composition page comes up, and here we've added an ad hoc field to just be able to select specific users to include with the email. And then otherwise it works pretty much as it does right in NEMO now. The contesting page, it's the validation page that's been updated to include a contest button. And when the user contests a transaction, it will show up in the validation page with this yellow kind of background to indicate that it's been contested but not yet resolved. If it is rejected, the contested transaction will show up with this red text and a reason or a contest rejected note, and the user could then either contest the record again or validate it, or well, I mean, those are basically the two options. They can contest it, they can validate it. Usually they'll work together with the staff member to get that resolved. Validated transactions, which I've not shown here, will show up with a basic green background. And we found this is a feature that is still in flux. There are different aspects of it that we think can be updated to better improve the user experience. Timed events that we use in our system, the primary one, which turned out to be a challenge on our deployment day, was interlock pulsing. And the way our interlocks are set up is they are designed to fail open, so that if they do not receive a signal from our system once per minute, they'll eventually open up so that the users can come in and actually make use of the system, and the interlock won't stop them from doing so. The pulse tells them to stay asleep, and they'll stay that way until they're normally started through Leo. The original design was set up so that an internal Leo function was going to be used within Docker to run the events, but on the day of deployment, that failed. It just didn't work. It worked in development for weeks, and then when I went to push it out to the live production, it just didn't work. So fortunately, as Bob mentioned, Jeff is quite savvy with SQL Server, and within short order, he had established a script to, a script to perform the same functionality. And it works pretty flawlessly. It's been running for almost a year now. Eventually, I do want to try to relieve SQL of the burden of doing that and try to put that job into a cron job on the server. This transaction auto validation, similarly, it's a SQL-based agent job that will run once a night, and depending on the time that transactions have been in the system, I think our current default is 5 days, it will set them to validated if they're not contested or validated manually within that period. The missed reservation cancellation notifications is something that we just recently got going, and that is something that is running within the cron job on the server that hosts our Leo application. It runs a bash script, and that script then sends a command to the Docker containers and gets it to execute a function that's within Leo. And that function then does the appropriate cancellation of missed reservations, as well as sending email associated with that. And that took some time to understand how to do, but once I saw that, I can see that's something we're going to want to take advantage of for other similar features in the future. Some other changes we made that are kind of more behind the scenes is that with respect to project and accounts, we have set up our system to mostly just use the projects table. The accounts table has been kind of deprecated. It still exists. It still has some data in it from the migration from our RIM system, but moving forward, we'll only be updating projects with information related to Simba and accounts. And transactions, various usage events, staff charges, area access records. We've added a few flags to those to help with some of the things like contesting and validation and other aspects of the system that we've modified to fit in with our workflow at Penn State. So those are kind of deeply techy, but I will be happy to answer any questions about those if people have some. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. And I guess we didn't talk about questions. I thought we had decided we would kind of try to push through with our slides and then answer questions afterwards. So I apologize if I stepped on anything there, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll try to get to the questions at the end.
Okay.
So if you could go to the next slide. I'm going to talk about the Leo reports, which we created a separate application called Leo reports to make Leo charge for using our labs and resources. We also had to integrate it with the university's SAP implementation they call Simba. It's implemented in ASP.NET, VB, SQL Server, SharePoint, and Power BI, and has both prod and dev environments for each of those. So there's like a web prod and dev, there's a database prod and dev, there's a SharePoint prod and dev, and Power BI prod and dev, so that we can do testing and get everyone to agree that it's what we want, and then release it. Next slide, please. We send out invoices on the 25th of the month and apply charges to Simba on the 5th, giving time for users to contest any charges. We use role-based row-level security in both our web and Power BI reporting solutions, making sure users can only see the data they're allowed to see. We have a standalone VB application just for administrators like me to perform routine monthly billing functions, and we'll get into that in one of the subsequent slides. And along with all of the data, all of the emails and all of the PDF files that we generate are all archived. So we can, if there's ever a question about who got an invoice when and what the email said and what was in the PDF file they received, we keep a copy of it, and we keep like I said, we take snapshots of the data at specific points in time so that we can get a history of how it was at the moment there, if there was a question. This has only come up infrequently, but it's monumentally helpful when it does. Next slide. So this diagram it kind of simply describes our data flow. It's kind of like an ETL, an extract, transform, load type of model. We use a SQL Server technology called SQL Agent to schedule many tasks that run overnight to move and transform data from several systems into Leo reports. The LDAP data provides us with information about our users, like their department and title. We also use Simba data as a data source to get account owners and end dates. We also pull out data out of our department's org chart to develop a supervisor reporting role so supervisors can see the data of their direct reports. Next slide. So this is the homepage for the Leo Reports web application. And based on the user's role, the home screen gives the user a collection of links to reports. And within the reports, they can only see the rows of data which they're allowed to see. So it'll do it. This is the list of reports that a more privileged user would see. Someone who's not a staff member might only see 3 or 4 reports. The 2 most used reports are the invoices report, which allows users to get a more detailed view of their charges, since the invoices emailed to them are summarized. We also allow customers to, upon request, to have their emailed invoices come in a detailed form, but there's only a few customers who've asked for that. The next most used report is the transactions report, which we'll show next. The transactions report contains all the detail needed for a user to understand their charges each month. Each column in the report is sortable and searchable, allowing users to quickly find specific transactions. So if you were to look at the column headings, they're in blue, they're all links. So if you click one of those links, the columns, you can sort by each column individually. And in addition, there's a bunch of text boxes above each of the columns, allowing you to search for a specific project number or a specific staff member's name, or within a specific date range. It's very helpful. Users can also download the data in CSV format if they wish to analyze it further on their own. You can see in the top left, there's an export to CSV button. We use colors green and red on the report to highlight important information. If you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see a bunch of green check boxes, which shows that these transactions have been validated. And in addition, if a project were closing, it would show up in red, like to highlight that it's very important that we get the billing done for this project before it's closed. Next slide, please. So this is a sample invoice. This is a summary invoice. The details shown there is rolled up. Like the detailed version of this shows it down. It has like transaction numbers and dates, and shows a bit more information. And the detailed invoices are available on the web and by request. We take a snapshot of the main reporting table each time data is emailed to customers or sent to Simba. Once data is sent to Simba, the data for that month and all previous months is locked. Next slide, please. The standalone administration app is just for administrators to run about twice a month, and it performs 4 main functions: sending bulk emails, creating bulk PDFs, creating JV files, the journal voucher files, for input into Simba, and processing Simba output called spool files, which we'll show you in more detail in the next slide. Next slide, please. So this slide is separated into the top and bottom. So there's a screenshot on top and there's a screenshot on the bottom. The top image is a sample screenshot of a JV file we send to Simba, and the bottom image is a sample of a spool file which they send back to us as output, and highlights any charges not accepted by their system, which are very few. But anytime they don't accept a charge, we need to fix that and get that money accounted for. Notice they both follow a well-documented fixed width format. Next slide. This is a SharePoint site where we house all of our Power BI reports for consumption by end users. And we separated the SharePoint site into 2 sections. These top 6 sections here are for staff, and on the very bottom in the center, it'll say reports for directors and core admins. I wasn't able to fit that into the screenshot without making everything super small and unreadable. It currently contains 9 reports, and the number of reports is growing. We're getting a lot of interest with this. Next, let's take a detailed look at the dashboard report. The dashboard report, you can see how Power BI allows us to get more information out of the data visually as compared to just a table view. All the reports in Power BI can be viewed in full screen mode or viewed embedded as part of the SharePoint web app. Each of the reports have drill throughs, meaning if you're like right click a data element, it would say a pop-up menu would appear and it would ask you, would you like to drill through to see the underlying data? And in addition, all the elements on the page have pop-up hover over elements. If you look in the lower right corner, you can see a pop-up where it gives you more detail about that specific bar and that bar graph, which is very nice. These Power BI reports are interactive. Okay, and the last slide for me, at least. This is the Leo info site. It's another SharePoint site. It's a public site for communications and training. It is one of the first places new Leo users go to get started. It contains a lot of videos, training videos. It contains the billing calendar, an FAQ, and links to each of the lab's individual websites for more specific and detailed information about each of the labs. Lastly, there's a private internal channel on the site containing information just for staff, which if you look in the top left, you'll see a link that says staff access only. And there's like a restricted site that as Bob mentioned, there's about 40 technical staff that can get some more detailed information that we try to communicate it out and share out there. And next, I'll turn it back to Bob to finish it up.
Yeah, actually, I think I need to talk about this stuff because Bob and I didn't discuss it. So I don't know if he's aware of what all these items might be. So I thought I would cover that. We were looking at the buddy system and trying to decide if that's something we can implement within our version of NEMO. So we'll be taking a closer look at that. Um, Another thing that's been asked for is some calendar-based features. Recurring events was something we wanted to find that seems like it's a bit complex. So we'll have to see if we can do that and maintain the full calendar library that's being used to render the calendar now. I'm not sure how important that will be in the long run. Right now, we can create events that repeat, but if you wanted to edit something, you'd have to edit each individual event you created. And the staff have been asking for something that works just like recurring events in, Outlook calendar or something. And for advanced reservation view, the staff and users tools at the same time and be able to make reservations. I'm not sure how we might be able to pull that off. There was some talk about including like a sort of a layover of a person's personal schedule with the view of a specific tool. This is something that requires some more requirements gathering before we have any understanding. And same with this next item, tool use chaining. I use that term loosely based on my understanding of talking with staff of how they might want to do this, but apparently several of the tools that they use involve multiple steps and multiple tools being used. And this is something that happens on a fairly regular basis. So they wanted to find out if there are ways to link together the ability to make reservations or to start or stop the tools. And again, this is a request that is going to require some more gathering of requirements to flesh out. Some user interface updates. There are some small things users have asked about. One thing I get repeated requests for is a new date time picker. So I might look into something related to that. And then the tool detail linking and updating. We've talked since the beginning of having some good links to actual information that we already have on the web related to each individual tool and adding that into the details section. So then Matthew was running the examples earlier and showing all those great pics of the tools that were involved. I thought that was really neat. Yeah, we're looking to get something like that going on as well. And that's it for our future work at this point. I'm sure more will be coming down the pike. No question.
Can you go to the next slide? So ending this, NEMO was a great starting point for us. And for any that dive into it, it has a lot of features. The modification takes some expertise across multiple programming platforms. The tools used from SQL to Django to GitHub and everything else, there's got to be some time. Business functions, I think we probably had a full year into this to start July 1 of last year. It was a year of meetings and discussions and implementation and trying to figure out how to move into a new financial system too and build the financial side that wasn't there, plus the interface to meet our needs with the multiple cores and everything else. Customization for your business and how your organization runs is I think in most cases you have to do it at some level. It doesn't have to be as extensive as what we've undertaken, but I think that there is our customization needs. Reporting and billing, that is, we use that information all the time. I can't tell you how many times my director goes, well, how are the cores doing this month? Because when they're not doing well, we have to pay for them. So he wants to know how that's hitting his budget. Now he has a page he can go to and it'll tell him month by month what their income is and how it compares to last year and the year before. So he's like in heaven. The people are tremendous, the right team and the resources and the ability to kind of push forward and get the job done. without getting derailed, which we were initially. That delayed us a year, but I think it was, well worth the wait. What we have now is better than what we had before, and with the technology capabilities and the needs of our community growing all the time, we have a tool that we can keep adapting. And then finally, the integration and understanding how the university works and not working kind of in a vacuum is critical to the success of the project. There were so many parallel activities that we had to kind of adopt around and pay attention to make this work. And it all came together July 1 last year, and we continue to use it every day. And this was an easy transition for our users. We had very little user concerns, issues, problems. It's been a great opportunity. So I think that's it. We'll answer any questions which are starting to come in. And then my contact information is there if you want to follow up after. All right, so the question up there is about what I'm seeing is, how do you handle the training of lab users to ensure that they validate their usage, charges, transactions? So that's a good question. We sent out information. So we had video trainings that we put out on how to use this system. We had some question and answer sessions in the beginning. We talked to them about the importance of validation, because it's easy to forget to log out and run up 90 hours of something, and then all of a sudden you get a bill for 90 hours when you used it 3, and you're like, what? And the PI is freaking out. It's way easier to kind of recognize those and look at it. And that validation is something that keeps coming up for the users. They need to validate. There are some people that ignore it because they know it's going to auto-validate. And we have to kind of continually remind them. It's not a perfect system, but it's better than not validating. I hope that answers that question.
We also keep track of some metrics on which users auto-validate the most, and we can have a follow-up.
Yeah, have conversations with them, like, why aren't you approving this or validating it? It's a good point. Is there a feature to document, track user training, practicing together? A new user 1 is work on a tool with experienced user 2. I don't think so.
Well, Bob, actually, the way that would probably work would be just through the standard use tool for another user. So if it's a staff member and a new user, the staff member would sign in, but they would select use tool for another user, select the name of the user they're working with, and that would then charge the tool use to the user. And if it's a staff member, would charge staff time for the staff member's time as well.
Right. If it's just another user in the group, then whoever the user logged in is who's going to get charged.
That's true. If it's just 2 users, training staff members.
Yeah. We only have training by staff, formal training. A lot of our first round training is on video now too, which we find, we put that in place early in COVID when the staff were not in the office for a month. They were all working on training videos because it saved so much time in the end once they got them implemented. And the English as a second language graduates that we have find being able to go back and refer to that when they have a question is way better, easier on the staff than having to go ask the staff over and over again. All right, I don't see any more questions coming through. As I had said,
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
I was just wondering how much of your data in those reporting tools that you have, how much of that data is coming just from Leo, or is it all of it that is coming from Leo? And compared to some of your other financial system, I saw that there was a diagram with some of it coming from LDAP, right? and you're putting some from a couple of different sources. How much of that is really just, could be done with just Leo's data?
It's probably like 90% Leo data, and we get a little bit of HR data to get like the org chart, and we get the LDAP data, which we're going to switch to the Azure Active Directory soon to pull, which college, campus, department, what's your title, what's your phone, like all that sort of directory information. And we get some data from our financial system, so we know how to who the owners of certain billing accounts are, and when to close certain accounts, and when new accounts become available.
Okay, that makes sense. And are you accessing directly into the database or using a REST API on Leo? How are you accessing that data?
It's a direct connection through. So there's a thing called SQL Server Integration Services, and you can use the SQL agent to run a scheduled job, which will run this integration services package, which is like Microsoft's answer to do ETL. One of the other pieces of data that is contained directly in the Leo reports database is all the rates. And so we have like F&A rates, and then we have consumable rates and tool rates and staff charge rates, and all that information is editable by a few. So we have like Leo security, and we have like a Leo reports security. So we have like a separate security model to so some of the financial information can be edited through that web interface, that Leo reports web interface, as I was describing as well. So that's like a fourth place to get data. Well, I guess fifth if you can count the HR. When I looked at that diagram, I didn't want to make it like overwhelming, but yeah, there's probably 5 data sources, but 90% of it comes from Leo directly.
And then the other thing is on the Power BI reporting, you can report things like, we were looking at dollars, but we can also report hours. We can drill down into individual staff billing by month. So we can look at the number of hours staff billed on different pieces of equipment in total for the entire month. And do that by groups of people and within each core, and get averages. The power, well, everybody knows the power's in the data, right? And the BI reporting gives us a great tool to show and visualize our value really across the campus.
Yeah, it also
Alright.
lets you quickly highlight which instruments are making the most, or use the most, which
Yeah.
instruments are making the most money, but which people are making the most money, and which people aren't, which tools aren't. And so that can help you make other decisions about how to operate your facility.
I see. And would that even ever become something that you would potentially put open source, or is it too tied to your specific data structure and your Leo, like in terms of how you creating those kind of report based on the hours? I mean, some of that stuff is just similar to the regular NEMO. It just tracks the time, right? So just wondering if some of that logic and some of that stuff could be,
I guess it's a Bob question. It's not that I mean, I'm willing to share it. Is Penn State willing to share it?
I mean, I don't know that there's anything to hide there, and there isn't any reason that how you do that couldn't be. I think it's really the configuration of Power BI reporting and some of the other reporting things that you've set up through the report provider, right? So it's how you connect the data, and once you create, well, and Dave or Jeff is a much better expert on this, but once you create the data set, then the tool like the Power BI reporting does the work for you, right? But you've got to extract the data from the different sources, put it into one area, and then extract the information is extracted out of that table. Is that right, Dave or Jeff?
Yeah, so there's this concept called a transactional database system, and an analytical database system. And the Postgres database that Leo writes to is the transactional system, and then the Leo reports SQL Server database is the analytical database system, and it takes the same data where it's highly normalized in the transactional system, and it denormalizes it for the analytical systems, because you want to be able to. A lot of times you say denormalize, a lot of people use the word flatten. It basically allows you to read the data quickly, but where a transactional system, it's based primarily to be able to write to the data quickly, so you're not leaving tables locked while you're doing writing. But I could go more into that if you want. I could get.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I think that answers my question. I was wondering how you gathered all that data from the different places and put it together, and because typically those tools like Power BI and stuff, they like to have one place where they get their
it's really important that the analytical system be separate, because an analyst could write a query that's a very long running query, like just show me all the data for the last 2 years, and it might run for a minute or two, and during those 1 or 2 minutes it's locking a bunch of tables, and now Leo can't write to it, which would be really bad.
Right.
So we do it overnight while the system's having its least load, and we do that ETL process. And there's a special type of load called a bulk transport, where you do table level locking instead of row level locking, and then you can move data like really fast, like 10 times faster. So you can move large amounts of data really quick. So we do the whole thing. It takes about 4 minutes. But if you were to do it at row level locking, you might lock the system for an hour. So
we ended a couple of minutes early. Thanks for the great questions. If anyone has any additional questions or follow-up, reach out.
I would just like to say thank you to everyone, particularly Matthew and NIST and everyone who's helped through the message boards as well. It's a really great community.
Thank you.